And we are recording, so just a reminder, if you object to being recorded, then please don't speak up. Uh, and so we'll probably publish this out to YouTube later on. It is Thursday, March 4th, 2021, and tonight we have Scott Helmers coming to speak to us about doing data analytics in Visio. So thank you for coming, Scott.
Sure.
Really appreciate you being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay. I wasn't sure whether you had, meeting business to take care of first, but if not, I'm good.
All right.
All right. Well, let me share my screen and show you a little bit about what we're going to do, and then take it from there. Bear with me one moment. So the idea tonight is, as much as anything, to open some eyes. At least I suspect that will be the case. That will be a positive outcome, to let folks know more about what's possible with Visio. So if you're interested in copies of the slides after the fact, there's my email address. I'll have it up again a little bit later, but be happy to send you a PDF copy of the slides if you're interested. To get started, I just have a question for you, actually a couple of questions for you. If you take your phone or a browser and go to menti.com, as you see at the top of the slide, and just enter that 8-digit code, 7548-1004, and just type in a word or two about the kind of diagrams you create most frequently in Visio. And I'll wait a moment. Always takes a little longer for this first of the questions because everybody has to get a phone or get the browser oriented in the right place. If you have any issues, let me know, but it's generally pretty straightforward. Just menti.com and that 8-digit number.
Okay, I'm in there, and it says, please wait for the presenter to show the next slide.
It does it? Well, let me go back one and come back to this then.
Mine says I now have ransomware. I don't know what that is.
I hope you're just joking. But
yes. Just
good, good. Are you able to type, anyone? The responses should appear in semi-real time. I haven't seen anything yet, so.
I just had a list of selections. It didn't give me an option to type anything.
Me too. Okay. I got the same thing.
Curious. Let me go to the next slide then. Oh, so this is the slide you saw?
Yes.
This question. Okay, well, good. We got a few answers there, 6 answers. Let me go back one then, and because I am curious, and if it doesn't work, I'll just have you tell me, but especially with this few people. Do you now see the question, what diagram types?
Yeah.
Okay. So just type in the kinds of diagrams you create in Visio, and a word cloud should appear. And if not, I'll just have you unmute and talk. So that seems to be a good bet at the moment. So what do you typically use Visio for? Anybody?
So
process flows.
Yep, process flows. Number 1 on the hit parade. According to Microsoft, roughly 1/3 of all diagrams created in Visio are created from one of the flowchart templates. And there are actually 15 different varieties of flowchart templates or process-related templates in Visio. All right.
UML and
UML, yeah.
Yeah.
How about organization charts, floor plans, timelines, any of those sorts of things?
I've done floor plans.
Okay. All right. Well, that's more or less the sort of thing I was expecting. Those are the common kinds of diagrams. And In terms of frequency of creating visualizations, most of you are in the, sometimes, a couple of you do so frequently. So the next question following from that is, when you create data visualizations, what software do you use? Curious. Now, these are the answers to the previous. I've never had this trouble with Menti before. That's bizarre. Well, it looks like once again, let me try advancing and coming back. I don't want to belabor the point here, but yeah. So just again, tell me, since we seem to be wrong answer on the wrong slide, what software do you use when you create visualizations?
Draw.io.
Draw.io, yeah.
Tableau, Power BI,
Yep.
Smartsheet.
Smartsheet. I haven't played with that one. Okay.
Yeah, I
I've
don't.
used- I've used Zepp. In addition to to Vizio, I've used Zeppelin.
Okay. So you say in addition to Visio, so have you created visualizations in Visio itself then?
Yes.
Excellent. And who's that saying that? Since I
This is Jim Wilcox.
Jim. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Let me put that
Hey, Jim.
browser
Hey,
window
Scott.
up on the other screen. Yes.
I was just saying hi. It's Derek.
Oh, hi, Derek. All right. So the good news is that some of you know that Visio can do different things other than just create a diagram. Let me show you a couple of examples of the kinds of things we're going to talk about and demonstrate tonight. You can certainly create an org chart in Visio. You've been able to do that forever. But you can also take advantage of the data capabilities in Visio to turn that flowchart into a dashboard. And I'll show you this example in a little bit more detail in a moment, but you can see that there are some metrics that are represented by several different types of graphics that are part of the org chart. Or it might be that you have a network diagram, and that diagram, it gets lit up when servers go down. So you see a red server, a yellow that's in a caution state, green servers that seem to be operating as you would expect them to, or as you would hope them to. A flowchart, simple flowchart, but in this case, the flowchart is not only a picture of the process steps that we need to follow, but also has shapes that are automatically color-coded based on their status. And I'll show you how to create a diagram like that as well. And then finally, we'll wrap up with Power BI and integration between Power BI and Visio. It's been available for a couple of years now that allows you to embed a Visio custom visual directly into a Power BI report. So the idea is, what can we do with data in a diagram? For many people, the question is, or the response is, you can have data in a Visio diagram, and yeah, very definitely yes. We'll look at how Visio allows you to visualize data, several different techniques. Talk about connecting data to an external data, or pardon me, connecting Visio to an external data source, and the reasons for wanting to do that. Probably obvious, but we'll talk about that. And then we'll look at that integration with Power BI. I've got a couple of slides at the end to wrap up with some links to Visio resources related to what we're talking about tonight. And I'm happy to take questions throughout. Don't wait till the end, especially with just the 6 or 8 or 10 of us, whatever it is here in the room. I don't have access to chat because I'm not part of the team. The way that it says chat is in channel meetings is only available to team members, and since I'm apparently not one, you can't reach me via chat. So Jim, if you don't mind, if anyone uses chat, you can interrupt me and let me know.
No problem.
Was that a question from the dog?
Yeah, no, he has no questions. He knows that
Okay.
He knows the dinner's here, so.
Got it. Just 10 seconds of background. I am a partner at a company based in the Boston area called Harvard Computing Group. About 25 years, my partner Mike and I have been principally operating as business process consultants. I also spend a lot of time doing technology-related training. Mike and I and a colleague at the time, about 15 years ago, created an add-in to Visio called Task Map, which is a specific style, implements a specific style of process mapping, content-rich, data-rich process maps. You'll see one or two examples of what a task map looks like through the course of the demos that I'll show you. I have been an MVP specifically for Visio every year since 2008, and it was because of needing to be the lead architect for this task map add-in that I ended up learning a lot about Visio, and things happened from there, including I've created half a dozen Visio-related courses for LinkedIn Learning and written a few books on the subject as well. So the real question then is, if in fact it's possible to put data in a diagram, what can we do with it? For many people, and I'll just post this for 30 seconds if you have, I know there's at least one yes from Jim. Anybody else, have you incorporated data into a Visio diagram before? And as that blue triangle or the blue slice of the pie shrinks a little bit, that's heading in the more expected direction, because it's relatively uncommon, despite the fact that Visio has been around for 20 plus years, relatively uncommon that people understand that there really are data handling capabilities in Visio. So how do you find out? The answer is pretty simple. In any Visio diagram, right-click on any shape, scroll down the context menu to the word data, and then select shape data, and that will open an extra window in the Visio, within Visio, called the shape data window. Now that window is normally off, so it doesn't open by default unless you've opened it previously. Once you've opened it, it will tend to reoccur or reopen in every diagram subsequent to that. What you'll see in the shape data window is potentially nothing for a given shape. Many shapes do not have any data fields at all. You might see a set of data fields, and you might even see, as in this case, you might see a set of data fields and data values that are associated with them. But the key here is many different diagram types already include data fields, and the way to unlock whether that's true or not is simply to right-click, select data, and then shape data. It is possible to add your own data fields, and part of doing more complete kinds of diagrams in Visio, for my money, is understanding that you have control over what data fields exist and the ways in which you want to use them. So this dialog does allow you to create data fields. I will show you that briefly. I'm not planning to spend a lot of time about that. It's a major subject we can talk about toward the end if you'd like, or we can save that for another time or for your own exploration. But it is possible to create your own data fields. In terms of which shapes already contain data, as I mentioned, many different diagram types already do. So for those of you who've created process maps, are you aware that every process shape in a flowchart or swim lane diagram that you've ever put onto a page in Visio has predefined data fields? Same thing is true for timelines. If you've created network diagrams, put shapes in a rack diagram, or just put servers and PCs and whatnot on a network diagram, created a floor plan, all of those kinds of shapes have data attributes already associated with them. Once you have that data, then it's useful to know that you can actually do stuff with it. And I'll show you a couple of examples. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Let me back up a second and stop there. Let me go ahead and show you a couple of things that are useful to know about. Let me go to a Visio diagram here. Bear with me. Close a couple of things. So here's the new page in Visio. I'm going to double click on basic flowchart just to launch a flowchart, something that many of you have done. I'll drag a start shape onto the page, use the auto connect feature to splash a couple of additional shapes on, add a decision, and maybe a couple of branches from that decision. You get the idea. Basic flowchart. This is what most people see. But as I suggested a moment ago, if you right click, choose data and shape data, a new window appears. Now, the first time you open it, it will probably be floating over the page like this. On one hand, that's good news because you can move it anywhere you want. So if it happens to pop up here, you can relocate it. Because 95% of all diagrams I work with in Visio contain data, what I generally do is dock it. And you can dock it on any of the 4 edges. Just grab the header and drag it over to the right, for example, and make it as big or as small as you want. And this is the mode in which I operate Visio the vast majority of the time. I know that my masters in my stencils are over on the left, the shape data window is on the right, and no matter what shape I click on, I will see its data attributes. Notice the dynamic connectors between shapes, those arrows, they don't have any data attributes, but all of the 2D shapes on the page do. And in fact, even the page can have data attributes. Notice if I just click on the background of the page, this particular page doesn't. But one of the things when you build more sophisticated diagrams, one of the things you can do is to store data attributes on a page, for example, and then all of the shapes on that page have ready access to those stored data values in the page. And indeed, you can even store data values in the document itself so that shapes on all pages across the document can have one source of a data field resident in the document itself. Any questions so far? Does this make sense?
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
Okay. Good. So I said that every flowchart you've ever created in Visio already had data attributes. Well, these are the 7 data fields from cost, through process number down through status. Those are the 7 fields that exist. Data fields in Visio are typed. So for example, this cost field, if I type alphanumeric characters and tab out or enter, press the enter key, pardon me, I see this error message that says your entry must be currency. That's because when this shape was originally designed, whoever designed it said, thou shalt enter only currency into this field. Similarly, the process number field, if I enter alpha characters, it says this entry must be a number. So we've got at least those 2 types. There's basic text or string data fields. There are date fields, and I can either type a date, or if I click the ellipsis button here, there's a pop-up calendar, so I can choose March 17th, and that value is now associated with that data field. Status illustrates another type of field. This is a data field that provides a drop-down list. So here's a predefined set of values, so I can indicate this task is completed, has been completed, for example. There are ways to use these data fields beyond just typing data into them, and I'll come to importing data in a moment. But I want to show you an interesting example, cross-functional flowchart. So same idea here. I'll just start with a basic diagram. I'll drag a start shape onto the page and fire a couple more similar to what we did a moment ago, and maybe we've got one up here and another one over here. So far so good. This looks very much like any ordinary swim lane diagram. With the shape data window open, when I click on this particular shape, you'll notice there's a field called function that currently has a data value of function. And if you look at the swim lane, you'll notice the head of the swim lane is called function. Let's change that. Let's type something like sales for this swim lane and maybe marketing for this swim lane. Now let's go back and click on this shape and notice the function now says marketing. If I drag that field, or drag that shape up to the sales swim lane, notice that the function field automatically updates. And by the way, if I drag that shape out of the swim lane structure altogether, the function field is blank. So part of the intelligence that you can build into shapes in Visio includes formulas and functions. And in this case, there's a formula inside every one of these flowchart shapes that says, if I'm in a structure aka a swim lane, then display the name of that swim lane. If I'm not, don't display anything. And that is, as you can see, that's automatic. So I as the user don't have to do anything to take advantage of that little bit of smarts that somebody's built into the flowchart shape. If you look at, just go to an office layout for a moment. Another example of some intelligence built into the shape. Here's a room. I've just dragged a room onto the floor plan. Now this is an example of a scaled diagram. So everything is drawn to scale. You notice the ruler across the top of the page is demarcated in feet. And this shape says it's 10 feet wide and 8 feet high. So that value is, those values, I should say, are also reflected in the shape data window. So a moment ago, we were looking at simply typing values into a shape in the flowchart example, and nothing happened other than the values lived there. But these are values that interact with the shape. So again, based on formulas inside this room shape, if I decide I want this room to be 12 feet, I can type 12, and it's now 12 feet wide. Similarly, if I manually resize this to make it some larger amount, that size is reflected automatically in the width field. Same thing with the length. And that's true for many of the shapes here. So if I drop a door on here and I decide, you know what, that's really should be a wider door. Let's make that door 48 inches wide. Then same thing happens. The data value change, the change in the data value is reflected in the shape and vice versa. So the good news is it's not just about static data values. There are lots of interactions that you can create in a Visio shape to take advantage of the data values that are part of that shape. Let me go back to my flowchart for a moment. And I want to talk briefly or demonstrate briefly what I talked about a moment ago, and that is the ability to create your own data fields. So over in the shape data window here, if I right click anywhere in that window in the background and choose define shape data, that opens this dialog. Let me zoom in so you can watch what I'm doing here. First of all, you'll see that the existing fields are all here, and you notice the types, date, and so forth. Owner is a string field and so forth. If you want to create your own data field, simply click New and give your field a name. Perhaps I want to create a drop-down list, so I'll just call this My List. Something really creative, but we'll go with it. My List. In the type drop-down, this is where I can specify any of the currency types or date, or we'll notice also Boolean and duration. Duration allows me to specify that something lasts for 5 weeks or 5 seconds or 3 days or whatever the case might be. In my case, I will choose list, but notice we have two kinds of lists, fixed list and variable list. The difference is this: if you as the shape designer provide a fixed list field and a set of values, then the user of your shape must choose one of those values. On the other hand, if you design the shape with a field that is a variable list, then the user can choose one of your values, but can also type free-form text as well. Just for the sake of argument, I'll choose fixed list. And the way I specify the values I want to include is to type them as a semicolon separated list in the format field. So I'll just do something really simple here. A, B, C, D. And I'm also going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to put a semicolon at the very beginning, effectively creating a null entry at the beginning of the list. The other fields I'll just touch on. You can set a predefined value. If I type BBB, that will be what appears as the default. Prompting text, I'll show you the purpose of that in just a second, and I'm going to call it there. And let me get out of zoom mode here. And notice I now have a field called My List. If I want to choose C, I can do so. If I want to choose a different value, I can. The reason I put the null entry at the beginning is if you don't do that, and someone has chosen a value like this, there's no way to reset it because this is a fixed list. I can't type anything else other than something that leads me to one of the values in the list. So this at least allows the user to blank that field if they choose to do so. Now, here's a question for you. I've added a field called my list to this shape. Does that field exist anywhere else? If you know the answer, great, or if you speculate what the answer might be, let me know either way.
Yes, or maybe no.
Well spoken. The answer is yes, or maybe no. Actually, I'll say it this way. It's no, or maybe yes. The answer generally is no. If I do something that affects a specific shape, then that field, my list, only exists in that shape. If I want to have that shape apply more broadly, oh, and by the way, if I drag a new process shape onto the page here, it does not contain that new field either. If I want that new field to be part of this shape and all future instances of this shape, and let me just make it a different color so we can tell obviously what I'm about to do here. Best way to do that is create a custom stencil. Over on the left, I'm going to select more shapes and new stencil in US units. I'm going to take this shape and drag it and drop it inside the stencil. And I can give it a name. I'll just call it Fred. And now I have a custom master called Fred. When I drag Fred onto the page, notice my list. And if I drag more instances of Fred, or if I duplicate Control D, every instance of this master will contain that list. So part of the power you have here is not only to utilize existing shapes, not only to create, to utilize existing data fields in shapes that already exist. Not only can you add your own data fields to shapes, but you can create a master shape very easily that has your customizations, and every instance will carry those customizations. Just thinking here, let's see, let's do this. Let's take a look at one answer to the question, what can I do when I have data in a shape? It's nice to know it's there. It's nice to know I can type values in. Let's take a look at a flowchart that has shapes that contain data. These particular shapes have the standard fields, cost, process number, and so forth, and also have an added field called risk. So at some point in the past, I added that field because I wanted to be able to track risk in this diagram and put it into a master. And so all instances now have that risk field as well. The other thing that I can do with this diagram is, in order to leverage the data that's in it, is to run a report. This is a standard Visio feature. On the Review tab, there is a button that says Shape Reports. Many Visio diagram types have built-in special reports. Almost all Visio diagrams have a report called Inventory. I'll just run that and show you what it is. It's of limited value depending on what you're doing, but let me choose the output format. I can either create an instant web page. Let's do that. It opened on the other monitor, but there it is. Here's an inventory report. It tells me each type of master that exists anywhere in the diagram and how many of them there are. Now, of course, you could go through and count yourself, but the nice thing is Visio will makes that trivial for you to do. As I mentioned, some shapes have their own special reports, and here's one for flowcharts. So let's run that. And this time, let's send the output to Excel. Visio creates the Excel diagram, or pardon me, the Excel workbook. And there it is. So what we see, and the way this particular report is defined, is we see master names, as we did in that inventory report. But notice that this report is grouped automatically. We have a count of how many decision shapes, how many process shapes, how many start-end shapes, and the other data fields, the key data fields that were part of those shapes. There are shapes that don't appear here, all the arrows, for example, because this report is set to automatically filter and only show a specific set of shapes. So we aren't bound by having data locked in a Visio diagram. We have at least this method, one method, for getting that data back out. Let's go back to the slides. And let's now talk about another thing to do with the data, something that's even more compelling in most cases, and really the reason why we're here, and that is visualizing data. What do we do with data? And the answer is it's all on the data tab. Now I need to pause for a second here and talk about the three different flavors of Visio that exist. Visio Standard does not include this data tab. So Visio Standard does still have data in shapes. You can still create your own data fields. You can create masters that have all your data fields in them, and you can run reports. So everything I've done up until now, you can actually do in Visio Standard. But from here on, what we're doing requires either Visio Professional or Visio Plan 2. And quick aside about that, Visio Professional and Visio Plan 2 are essentially the same. Visio Professional is the traditional perpetual license desktop install version of Visio. Visio Plan 2 is that with some extra features, but the key difference is subscription. So it's that classic Microsoft and every other software company model. What can we do to get people to pay us something every single month? Well, we're going to offer a subscription product. We're going to add some cool features that aren't in anything else and see whether that works. And that's the idea with Visio Plan 2. So either Professional or Plan 2 gets you the data tab. What we're going to do with the data tab is create visualizations like this one, for example, or this one, or something like this network diagram where we're viewing server status with icons, traffic light icons that tell us the status of the server. Both the visualizations and the legend, as you'll see in just a moment, were generated in Visio. This is not a new capability. What I'm about to show you has been in Visio since 2007. The key is, the steps required, I should say, are pretty straightforward. You select a data field. When you want to create a graphic, you select a data field, tell Visio how you'd like to visualize it, and then how to position that visualization on the shape. You can continue and add multiple shapes or multiple types of visualizations to the same graphic. And that's what some of these examples show here, is multiple visualizations on the same shape. So let's take a look at the types of graphics. So there are four different ways that are built into Visio to visualize data. One is the set of callouts. Some are just unadorned text boxes. Others are like some of the examples you see here. They're text boxes that have an icon. So you can choose an icon to represent a different type of data, the euro symbol, or a date, like calendar looking symbol or something else. The second way to visualize data in Visio is using something called icon sets. Each icon set contains between 2 and 5 icons, and you select the one you like and then tell Visio, simple drop downs, the conditions under which each of those icons should appear. Data bars are great for numeric data. They're progress indicators, they're star ratings, they're thermometers. The speedometer needle moves back and forth as the underlying data values change. And then the fourth type is called color by value. And this is where the example we saw of a flowchart that had different shapes or shapes that contain different colors, those colors were all derived automatically from a data value inside each shape. You access these from the Data tab. There's a Data Graphics group on the Data tab. There's also a button called Advanced Data Graphics, and that's the one I'll be using momentarily to show you how this works. To generate a legend, same idea, go to the Data tab and just click the button that says Insert Legend. I'll show you that in a second too. So let's take a look at this diagram. Here's a flowchart, simple human resources recruiting hiring process. Each of these shapes contains data fields. And oops, I wanted the version without data, pardon me. Each of these shapes contains data fields, but not much in the way of data. You notice there's a process number, everything else is blank or 0. And that's true for all the shapes in the diagram. Now, why there's a 3-digit process number becomes clear a little bit later when we look at how we can link this diagram to data. Before I show you that, let me go back to the diagram that actually does have data in it, and let's concentrate on visualizing first and then getting data from outside the diagram into the diagram. Go to the Data tab, and on the Data tab, we have this button, Advanced Data Graphics, as I mentioned. I'm going to choose Create New Graphic, and I want to select the item. Remember, 3 things you have to do. Select the field, select a visualization type, and then position the graphic. So let's new item, and let's start with something simple. Let's say we want to put the contents of the status field as a text call out on the shape. And first thing I'm going to do is simply select all the defaults here for positioning and other values. So let me select OK and OK. And now all I'm going to do is select all the shapes, so Control A, and go back to my gallery of graphics where I now have one and click. And what I get is a really ugly and not very useful text rendering of the status. And when I say not very useful, part of the issue is the default positioning doesn't really do much for me. So let's do this. Let's go back to the gallery, right click, edit, and I'm going to double click to reopen the edit item dialog we were looking at a moment ago. And this time, what I'm going to do is say, no, I don't like your default positioning. Let's position this centered left to right and at the top edge of the shape. Click OK, click Apply, and I'll just move this off to the side. You can see that that's better, but you know what? Top edge might not be quite far enough up. Let's say above shape and click OK. And that actually, for the most part, looks pretty usable. So not only are these graphics easy to create, but they're very easy to edit and adjust as you go. What I'm going to do next is just show you a couple of the other graphic types. I'm going to edit this one, and I'm going to delete that graphic. That really isn't very useful. There's going to be a much better way to show status. But let's do this. Let's create a visualization for on-time percentage. Actually, no, we don't have that field in here. Let's bear with me 1 second. Yep, I was thinking of a different example, but we'll take a field like the cost. And this time let's take cost and let's show it as a data bar. And we have a gallery of predefined data bars, so I can show graphics in a variety of ways. Notice even multi-bar graphs. You saw an org chart example a few minutes ago with bar graphs next to each shape. Many people think of bar graphs, think they have to go running to Excel, but that isn't necessarily the case. I'm going to choose a thermometer, and I'm going to position that on the left edge of the shape and position it about at the bottom. Let's try that. Left edge and bottom. Click OK. before we even look at that, well, actually, we can do this. We can apply it and see, and that's okay. We might want to tinker with it, but that's good for now. Let's click New Item and add risk. And you know what? We'll do this with the pardon me, one second here. There's risk. I knew it was there somewhere. So we're going to look at risk, and this time let's choose an icon set to show you what that looks like. As I mentioned before, it's simply a matter of saying I want to choose from some set of icons, 2 to 5 icons. How do I want them to look? Maybe for risk, we want to use circles like this. And in this case, we can choose from the drop-down a variety of different types of comparison. I'm going to stick with equals for these just to keep it simple. And we'll say 5. I happen to know my data values. This is a useful thing to know. I happen to know my data values are such that I've got values of 1 through 5. So I want this circle to be lit up fully if our risk is level 5 and different percentages down to 1. So click OK. Now we've got a second visualization. And let's add one more just for the heck of it to show you the fourth style. I'm going to choose status, whereas a few minutes ago we represented status as text. What I want to do now is represent it by changing the shape, the color of the shape. I don't want to color any shapes that have no value, so I'm going to delete that row. And Visio chooses colors for me, but frankly, they're always kind of garish. I'm going to go with green for not started, but let's go with something a little bit more pastel. And in progress, maybe is going to be the yellow color, and completed is red or this orange. So just 3 colors. Click OK. Click OK. Get out of zoom mode here. And now we can see that we've got risk in the upper right. We've got the cost associated with a thermometer. We can see low costs and high costs based on the amount of red in the thermometer. And each shape has a color assigned to it based on its status. I mentioned the legends. Insert legend. Do you want it to be arrayed horizontally or vertically? I've got some horizontal space in the lower left corner here. So let's choose horizontal. And we get an instant legend. Let's drag it down here. And I can resize it. In the case like this, what I'd probably do also is select everything and go with black text because I think that'll show up a little bit better. So there you go. It's not hard at all to take this diagram and pretty well light it up with data values. Again, I'm going to pause here. In fact, let me go back to stop sharing for just a second here. Let me ask whether this is making sense. Is it?
Yep, definitely.
Questions? Are there things you can, examples you can think of ways you might be able to take advantage of this sort of capability?
Yeah, you intrigued me with the floor plan. I was wondering if, and you showed that you could embed that in Power BI. If we had
Yes.
a data source that identified a person and what seat they're in, we could write a Visio diagram that like populated that and showed who's in what seat what day.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a project for, if I have a chance, well, actually it's identified by brand, so I probably shouldn't. I'm working on a project for a major entertainment company that also has theme parks. And that's a lot of what we're doing. I've created a set of diagrams for them that starts at the floor plan. And we will light it up exactly as you described. Like a lot of companies these days, they're looking at even more strongly at the hoteling concept. So I want to be able to look at the floor plan to see which cubicles are busy next Tuesday, and I want to be able to reserve one that's not. They also have the network infrastructure in the diagram, so I can turn on a layer that shows where the where the Ethernet ports are, where the switches are, where the wireless access points are. From there, we can drill into the network infrastructure and see a network diagram. From there, drill to a rack diagram. And the rack diagrams actually have several different of these graphics on them, so that, for example, if they want, they click a button and apply a graphic that shows red, yellow, green for servers that are within 5 years, or 3 years or less is green, 5 years or less is yellow, and 5 years or more since purchase is red. So that way they can, with that view, instantly see where they should be focusing some attention on old servers. There's another view that shows performance. There are other views, other graphics for other purposes. So yes, you're exactly right. You're thinking on exactly the right lines.
Okay, worth the price of admission.
Excellent, good. Anybody else with? Jim, you said you've actually done some visualizations in Visio. What sort of things have you visualized?
Gosh, it's been a while. I'm trying to remember. I know I have.
I was just curious what diagram type, not the specific application necessarily. Is it floor plans, network diagrams?
It would have been network diagrams. Yeah, that's what I recall working with there.
Okay, makes sense. Anybody else? All right, let's go back and look at some more, and let's answer the question that was implied in the question that was just asked about, if I have data somewhere, could I visualize who's sitting in each cubicle? And let's actually show how that's done. It's all well and good to type data into boxes in the shape data window, but that gets old really fast. And plus, you've got data in so many other places. Why not be able to link that data to the diagram? And that's exactly what the data linking feature in Visio Professional is all about. So what kind of data can you get to? Not surprisingly, just about any Microsoft data source that you would expect, including SharePoint lists, SQL Server databases. The good news for many is that there is generic access to virtually any database via ODBC or OLEDB. Perhaps I've used ODBC in many cases. So if you have data in Salesforce, or you have data in an SAP or an Oracle database, makes no difference at all to Visio. It's simply, all you need is to define the ODBC connector, and you're all set. Even better is what you create when you link a data source to Visio to a diagram is a dynamic connection. So if the data in any of your sources refreshes, then your diagram refreshes as well. You can do it manually. You can set a timer so it updates every n minutes, or you can write code to control exactly how it happens. The way to accomplish this, no surprise, is also on the Data tab. There's a group called External Data. The Quick Import button packages a bunch of steps all in one. It only works with Excel, which is why you see the little Excel icon on that button. But it does allow you to point a Visio diagram at data in Excel with just a couple of clicks, and Visio automatically opens the diagram, makes some guesses about how you'd like to visualize those data fields, brings them all in, applies them to the shapes, and adds the visualizations. So it's pretty magical to watch. I will tell you, in the real world, I find that 7 out of 10 times its guesses are interesting, but not really that useful for me in the real world. So I tend to do what I'm about to show you, which is use the custom import button and to manually refresh, or use the other alternatives I mentioned for refresh. There are 2 steps involved. One is to use the custom import button to point to and connect to the data source. And then the second step is to link individual rows of data to specific shapes on the page. And I'll show you that as well. So let's do it. Let's go to this diagram. This is the one I showed you a moment ago that has data fields, but only one field has an a value in it, the one called process number, and now we'll reveal the reason why. And that's because I have data in Excel, just to make it easy, and you'll notice that there's a column called process number. And I have 3-digit numbers there that, surprise, surprise, match what's in the shapes. But you'll notice that none of the rest of this data is in these shapes. Also, take a look at the fields that are, the columns that are blue and the columns that are orange. The ones that are blue and orange, by the way, I added the color orange. The ones that are blue are the standard fields: process number, owner, start date, end date. Those are the ones: process, owner, start, end, and so forth, down through and including status and cost. The orange fields are columns that, for data values, they're data fields that don't exist in my shapes yet: description, risk, and on-time percentage. Visio data linking will automatically add those fields and the corresponding data. So let's do that. I'm going to close this. Actually, I'll leave it open. I think I can do that. Let me save. Go back to Visio, and on the Data tab, I will click the Custom Import button. Here's the dialog that allows me to choose my data source, including virtually anything via ODBC, as I mentioned. I will stick with Excel, go with Next, and now I simply browse to my data source. So it is in my Documents demo folder, Data Analytics, and it's this spreadsheet full of data that we just looked at. So I'll select that. Oops, looks like I didn't select it successfully. Let me do that again. Operating in hyper zoom mode here is, sometimes I miss things. So click Next. Now, Visio has just gone out and opened that workbook, and it says, which tabs do you want? And in this case, that is that data we looked at was on a tab called Process Data. So I will select that. I can refine that data source if I want to. So if I want to only include certain columns and certain rows, I could. I'll go with the default. Here's an interesting case. If I go back and look at the data for a second and remind you that that column on the left was called process number, Visio actually analyzes the data looking for what appears to be the unique ID for each row of data. And it's pretty good at it, actually. I find it's right more often than not. The good news, though, if it happens to guess wrong, or if you need a combination of fields to be the unique descriptor, unique ID for the data row, you can alter those with simple checks. But process number is correct. So I'll click Next and click Finish and get out of zoom mode here. And now we see something that you may not have ever noticed before or ever had occasion to see if you haven't linked it to data, and that's the external data window. So that's a separate Visio window that is Visio's internal representation of that external data. Notice the comment, the pop-up that says drag rows onto the page to link to existing shapes or add new shapes. I'll show you that in just a second. But also, you can do it automatically if you have a unique ID predefined, as we do. But let's take the manual case first, just so you know how that is done. If I want to take this row of data, which I happen to know belongs to the start shape, I can just drag it up here and drop it right on the start shape. And when I do that, now you'll see that the description field, the risk field, the on-time percentage field, those previously non-existing fields are here in this shape. And in addition, we have a value in the description field, which is actually the only value in that row of data. So that's cool. If you want to add a shape and populate it with data at the same time, simply select the appropriate shape over here in the stencil. And let me do this. Select the process shape here in the stencil, select a row of data, and when I drag and drop that row onto the page, it adds that shape and populates it with data. So that's another alternative. Not just add data to an existing shape manually, but create a whole new shape with that data. I'm going to undo because I'm going to do the third alternative, which is this link data button. This allows me to tell Visio, tell the Visio wizard what I want. Whoops, that's not the right button. Control 4. There we go. Let's zoom in. I want Visio to do the linking for me. So I'm going to say, yes, do this for all shapes on the page. The field that contains the unique ID in the data column is called process number. And the field inside each shape that contains the key value is also called process number. The names don't have to be the same. They just happen to be here. Click Next, click Finish. And now, when I select any shape, notice that process step 120 has all of the data values from the spreadsheet, as does 130, 140, 190, the decision shape, even the end shape. Now that I have that data in these shapes, one of the reasons I included a field called description is because I want to take advantage of a time-honored technique in Visio that lets me use data values by inserting them onto the shapes to display as text. This is not related to the data graphics. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. But this is something that's been around in Visio forever and does exist in Visio Standard, by the way. I'm going to close the external data window because I don't need it any longer, at least not at the moment. And let's zoom in even a little bit more here so you can see the result of what I'm about to do. I'm going to select these shapes in the top row, the ones down here that also do not have any text on them. I'm going to go to the Insert tab. And again, this is a feature that exists in Visio and has for forever. I'm going to insert a field. Visio asks what kind of field data I want to insert on these shapes, and shape data is likely to be the answer in many, many cases. But notice I have document info like the author and keywords and the file name, page information. So just like in PowerPoint where you can, or Word, where you can insert fields that will automatically show you page numbers, you can do that in Visio for page numbers, shape numbers, and similar. We'll go back to shape data, and what I want is the field called description. So choose OK, and there we go. So the nice thing is, because I already had those descriptions in my external data, being essentially lazy, I take advantage of this feature in Visio so I don't have to do a thing other than click a couple of buttons to establish some links. And by the way, the connection between an inserted field and the data is dynamic, as you would probably expect it to be. So let's say we change this description to advertise open position. And as soon as I tab out of that field or move out of that field, then the text on that shape is updated. The same thing is true, by the way, if I go back and update the data in Excel and refresh the data linkage. And by the way, that's the right thing to do. This data mechanism, as it was, the data linking mechanism, as it was designed by Microsoft, was designed as an import. It's not a round trip. So changes that I make in the Visio diagram itself to the data are not moved back automatically to the Excel workbook or to the SQL database for that matter. So the general rule of thumb is once you've linked a Visio diagram to an external data source, use the external source as the source of truth, make all your data changes there. And in fact, let's do that. I'm going to undo what I just did here because I don't want to break the link to this shape. Let's go back to our data and let's make that same change here. Advertise open position, but let's also change a few other things. Let's say the, I don't know, the cost of this is 25 instead of 15 for that same shape. And let's also I'll just change another description because that'll stand out a little bit more than some of the other changes. Make new ID card. Let's save and back to Visio. And now it's simply go to the data tab and click the refresh button and watch the advertise open shape and the make ID card shapes. When I do this, and let's get this guy out of the way. There we go. It's already happened. Make new ID card, advertise open position. And sure enough, this shape also has a cost of 25 instead of 15. This, as I suggested at the outset, is all driven from Excel in this particular case, but that is not a limiting factor. That's simply for the sake of demo expedience. I want to show you, I mentioned task map. This is the Visio add-in that my company created 15 years ago as a specific content-rich style of process map. And I won't, this is not a sales pitch. Trust me, I'm not going to do that. But I just want to give you some sense of what you're looking at. Each task has a set of predefined data fields. So in the shape data window, you'll notice that there are, 15, 18, 20 predefined fields, things that we think are likely to be key data that you'll want to know about each task in a process. Notice as well that there are user-defined fields. There are actually 6 of them. 4 of them have already been customized with start date, end date, and so forth. Field 5 and field 6 are still waiting to be customized. So we give you some data fields. We give you free choice for others. Part of task map is a standard way of viewing the data fields. So for example, this thing that says procurement SOP, you'll notice that's in a field called guidelines. As a general rule, and here's that prompting pop-up text that I alluded to but never really explained before. The prompting text is a way for you to convey to your users what they should do with this particular data field. So in this case, guidelines tend to be documents, things that relate to, or instructions, things that relate to how to do the work of this task. In contrast to a resource represented by the wrench, the resources are the tools or supplies or materials, forms of somebody fills out, a database, the things that you use to do the work. There is a responsible role at the top, 0 or more supporting roles down at the bottom, because tasks don't happen in a vacuum with one person. There's usually someone responsible, but there are often other people involved, at the very least for advice or consent, if not actually assisting with the work of the task. And then there's some timing information, a unique ID in the lower right corner. So the real point here is that we take advantage of not only the ability of fields to exist in a shape, but the ability of those fields to be typed in various ways for adding value for things like cost and duration and so forth, and dates. And then we have a pre-built set of ways for visualizing data. But then on top of that, we want to be able to link this diagram to external data and visualize the result. Pardon me. This particular diagram we created for a client a few years ago. They use Microsoft Project Online, and they wanted to have a best practice view of the process built in Task Map. They wanted to manage instances of that process in Project Online, and then return that data back into a dashboard view of the process. And so that's exactly what this is. They use the Microsoft Project button that we provide, and I won't bother to click it, but it actually takes all the data from this map and sends it to Microsoft Project. Then they created some visualizations that you see summarized here, so that for each task, we see a flag that indicates what the relative risk associated with this task is. And then where Project Online really comes into play is the icon in the lower left corner of each task. So we're measuring budget versus actual. So what was the budgeted time or expected time of completion for each task? What is the actual completion time we got back from Project Online? And this data graphic in the lower left corner is based on a simple calculation between those two numbers. So we can see, as you can tell from the legend, we can see whether tasks completed on time, slightly over budget, or more grossly over budget. The percentages used here, 10%, are just illustrative. You can obviously build a formula that shows anything that you want. In this particular case, the tasks across the bottom row haven't been completed yet, which is why they don't have an icon in the lower left. But again, either driven by code, driven manually, or by a timer, as Project Online gets updated, the diagram would be updated as well. So I'm going to pause once again and ask for questions or comments. Just still looking useful, or looking even more useful now that you know that live data is an option?
Absolutely, that's awesome stuff.
Whole new appreciation for Visio.
Yeah, well, good. I hope so. As I said at the outset, I often, when I show things like this, I find that I open a few eyes, and I consider that a good thing. Just to wrap up, I want to close with Power BI, because that's a subject of interest to multiple of you from what you said at the outset. Let me share again. So the deal with Power BI happened a couple of years ago, might be as long as 3 now, certainly 2, with the intent that you can add value to a Power BI report or dashboard if you can provide more context than just some other types of data visualizations. So it's not to replace other visualizations, it's to supplement and provide added value. There is a Visio custom visual, and it's available for free. You just go into the Power BI marketplace, type Visio, and it should pop right up. And that will result in this little Visio icon in the PBI visualizations gallery. Armed with that, you can drop a Visio visual onto your dashboard and populate it with, in a way that I'll show you in a moment, with a result that can behave like this. The different visuals are interactive. So just as happens with other kinds of visuals, if I click to filter one visual, if other visuals have been set up accordingly, they will filter automatically as well. So in this case, I can click in a diagram and the data bars will filter, or vice versa. So let's see what that looks like. Just have to get the right browser window here. Where'd it go? There it is. All right, so here is a Power BI dashboard, facilities management example. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Let's say we've been looking around in this diagram, and we see a bunch of people and so forth. I should make a quick aside here and mention that the Visio diagram in question, the one that you're going to use here, needs to live in one of 2 places. It either needs to live in SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business. But the good news is it's simply a matter of either copying it there or saving it there. And in Visio these days, like in the Word and Excel and PowerPoint, you can just save directly to a OneDrive or to a SharePoint library. As a part of that quick aside, so this, for example, is the full version of the annotated org chart that is simply a Visio diagram stored in SharePoint. Here's an example of that recruiting process with a couple of data graphics on it. Here's an example that we just looked at in Visio. This is a similar version, an earlier version of that same diagram that was linked to Project Online. So simply having the diagram there in SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business allows me to do what you're about to see. So as I say, here's this floor plan. I can drag and zoom, also navigate around in the drawing just as I could in Visio or in Visio Online in the browser tab. But the real power comes this way. we're looking at temperatures per person across the top. We're looking at temperatures related to room numbers. We're looking at observed temperature and expected temperature in two separate visuals here and in one consolidated visual here. But the real thing that jumps out to me or to anyone who looks at this diagram, this dashboard, is likely to be the two big red spots, the red bars. So room number 2FD004 has a temperature of 76. That's nice to know, but unless I know these cryptic room numbers and the layout of my diagram intimately, or my cubicles intimately, I don't know where that is. Well, here's the magic. One click on this bar that says 76 degrees, and the diagram automatically zooms in and reorients to show me that, hey, not only is that where that one hot room is located, but that's where both hot rooms are located. Now, if I'm the facility manager and I'm in Phoenix and it's July, and that's the southwest corner of the building, I'm going to say, tough luck. That's the way it is in Phoenix in the summer. But even with that bit of callousness, chances are good, at least now you know more than you did before. You know that it's not just two isolated rooms, but two rooms that are in the same section of the building. So that gives me context for this data. By the way, this diagram and others, there's a set of 7 of them that Microsoft created to demonstrate this capability. I have the URL for this in my PowerPoint slides, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Just show you a quick example. Here's another floor plan example. This one happens to be a retail store, and we're looking at sales figures in the blue bars on the right visual over here. Suit coats are clearly not selling. So what is that? What is that about? Well, one click on the suit coat bar, and the diagram zooms in. And when we look at that, we realize that, you know what, suit coats are in a rack. It's in the back of the store where there's work going on. Nobody can get to the rack. So it could also be that they're just ugly suits. But on the other hand, we now have information we didn't have. We have context that we didn't have before. And there are other examples for sales leads and loan approval and other kinds of diagrams as well. So again, I'll provide that link in just a second. Just to finish this thought for Power BI, here's the diagram I want to embed in my visual. So this is stored in SharePoint. I go to Power BI. You can use either Power BI desktop, or in this case, I'm just using the web version. It's completely sufficient. I have my visualization in a Visio visual in the gallery already. So I'm going to click, and that drops a visual on the page. I'm going to make it bigger because I want my diagram to take up a fair chunk of real estate here. In the fields that we've already connected to the two visuals that exist, one of them is the ID, the unique ID for each task. So I'm going to select that as my key, the key data value, and then I'm going to drop in the link to this diagram, the one we were just looking at here, and I'll click connect. And that's the wrong link. You do have to pay attention to the link format here. I do occasionally find that I need to do it this way. Let's go back and get the share link here. Copy the link. Let's try that one. Yep, broke my visual. Good news is it's trivial to drop it in again. Select task ID, try this link, and there we go. So now PBI has gone out to SharePoint, grabbed that diagram, dropped it in here, and now I can use the filters and so forth to indicate what connections I want to make between this diagram and these data bars over here on the right, in order to end up with something that behaves like this, where I can select a shape and have filtering happen. So why is this shape yellow? Well, it's yellow because it turns out that the actual time exceeds the expected time for that particular shape. Again, just the way I happen to set up that particular dashboard. All right. I've been rambling here a bit. I appreciate your feedback. Let me just wrap up. Any shape can contain data. Lots of them already do. You already know how you can get data there. You can type it. You can link to external data sources. There's a wide there is a wide variety of visualizations already available in Visio. You can actually create some custom visuals inside Visio itself. That takes a bit more work, but there's a good range of ones that already exist. And then linking Power BI and the Visio diagram truly can add context to your data in ways that just other visuals don't necessarily do. The links, some of the links here, this is the one I was referring to a second ago, aka.ms/Visio PBI. That's all you need. That'll give you those 7 Microsoft-built Visio Power BI integration demos. There are other links here for other places to get information about Visio. There are a number of good blogs and websites. I don't know, John, did you ever arrive? I didn't see you earlier. I don't know if you're here now. John Marshall from Ottawa, Canada is the original Visio MVP, literally #1, 20 plus years ago. And he's reconstituted his website recently, so there's some good stuff there. Chris Roth is an artist in an engineer's body, or vice versa. He's a guy who does more creatively artistic things with Visio than I ever can imagine. It's just stunning. David Parker and John Goldsmith both dig deeply into the internals of Visio, so much more technical focus. Chris does a lot of very geeky stuff too, but he's also got a lot of UI focused things. And if you happen to speak French, Michelle is another Visio MVP whose blog is in French. This is more information about me, some of my LinkedIn Learning courses over here on the left. Taskmap.com, if you are in the process mapping business and you want to create something that's a lot more than just a flowchart, then Taskmap might be an answer there. And there is a free trial. My books, yeah, that's pretty good. Other than that, I think the main thing is my email address, scott@visiostepbystep.com. As I mentioned, if you're interested in copies of these slides, so you have these links, just send me an email. I'll be happy to send you a link to the PowerPoint slide in PDF form. And other than that, let me stop sharing and turn my camera back on, and I'm happy to answer any final questions, if any.
All right. Any other questions?
No, that was great. Thank you. I had no idea you could do some of that stuff with Visio.
Good. Glad to know you have some possibilities you didn't know about.
It's really
Cool.
fantastic stuff. Definitely appreciate it. Was definitely getting my mind going on different things that are possible there. So I've seen a lot of those fields in there, and had never really given a lot of thought to how some of them, like the cost field and stuff like that. I think I've run into that more in like the UML diagrams and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And was like, all right, well, why do I need a cost field on that? But really, really great stuff. I think I seem to recall having done code generation in Visio too at one point, but maybe I'm thinking of a different tool.
No, well, I don't, not code generation per se, but Visio used to have a database. Well, there is still a database reverse engineering capability. So you can point Visio at a database and it will create a structure diagram for you. Okay. What used to exist was the opposite. Does not exist any longer, but you could actually create your schema in a Visio diagram, and then it would create the schema in SQL for you. Unfortunately, that went away.
Interesting. They have that in Visual Studio now, but that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. I could have sworn I remembered diagramming classes in code, but like I say, maybe that was a different a different application. I'm just getting it confused.
It is possible, and there may be some third-party add-ins for Visio that you that do that sort of thing. I don't know, but
yeah. But fantastic stuff. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and show that to us, and that definitely explains how I've seen some of these, these types of active visualizations on different presentations before, and always wondered how they got into like Power BI and stuff like that. It didn't occur to me. So I've played with it in Visio itself, but I don't know why it never connected that you could pull that Visio document right into Power BI. So
well, as I said, it's only a couple of years that capability has existed. So that's that's understandable that you might not know that. It's newish.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool.
Right.
All right, Scott at visiostepbystep.com if you want, if you want anything, answers to questions, things that occur to you tomorrow or 3 months from now, I'm happy to help. But if you do want copies of the slides, just let me know.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
You're
Scott.
welcome.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good evening. Take care,
You too.
everybody.
Bye.
All right. Good night.
Thank you. I was the end of the recording. Take care.
All right. Thank you
Bye.
for coming. Good night.